Now! I said it low and fast as I wrapped my arms around Evelyn and turned my back to the muzzle flash. Snow cracking under my boots. Breath burning the first round. Chewing the birch where my head had been. The second man rushing with a baton like a YouTube expert. And I moved. The way years of drills teach you to move. Strip the wrist. Break the angle. Send the weapon skidding. Keep the kid behind your ribs. Keep your eyes open. Sirens were late. Security was confused. One officer yelled, "Drop the child," and I barked back, "I'm the nanny." And then the black SUV slid to a stop, and Richard Langston stepped out, looking less like a billionaire and more like a father who just realized how thin the ice really is. And when Evelyn whispered "Daddy" but wouldn't let go of me, yeah, that happened. You could feel the whole house breathe different. They replayed the footage inside the part where I didn't hesitate, and Richard asked in that quiet voice people use when the truth is heavier than pride, "You have combat training, don't you?" And I told him yes, but I wasn't applying to be his bodyguard. I was applying to care for his daughter, and he slid my old contract aside, offered full authority over Evelyn's day and safety. Better pay a room down the hall, no questions when I needed answers. And I said I'd stay for her because the way she clung to my sleeve was a promise I recognized from another life. I grew up in Ohio, 2 girls walking home from school, me and my little sister Jasmine white van. Tuesday afternoon detective with a tired tie saying runaway. Like 6-year-olds do that. And I turned that word into training. Taekwondo National Guard teaching girls to say no with their hands. You know what I mean? So when 2 pros stepped onto a quiet Wyoming lawn, it wasn't fate, it was math, and I already knew how to solve it. The math said, inside job a guard clocking out 10 minutes before a blind spot, a second man holding someone's phone. So we packed before midnight and drove a road. I knew by memory off-grid, nothing for trackers to sniff. And at 3 a.m., my burner buzzed, a woman's voice scraping my ear. "You shouldn't have brought her there. Tell Richard he was never supposed to see me again." Click. I found him sitting in the den like he knew the past was coming through the walls. He said her name like it tasted like smoke. Rebecca, his wife, dead 3 years, and now she was calling me like I'd broken a rule I didn't know existed. We moved again to an old Appalachian place his grandfather kept for whiskey and secrets. Sheriff Lell knocked without sirens. Said somebody with money had been tugging on camera networks. And then the truth started arriving in envelopes. A birth certificate that said, Rebecca used to be Thorne. A guardian named Lyle Andros. A shell trust tied to something called Project Echo. A program that dressed itself in research and raised children like experiments. And a woman named Celia Monroe came in from the cold, with a voice full of regret, and told us Helix or Echo or whatever name they used that year had a ring of 7 subjects. And if you think that sounds like a horror story, you read at night and forget by morning it wasn't because Evelyn's initials sat on a file labeled EL6 Crown Protocol Behavioral Scaffolds that look like lullabies if you don't read the footnotes. We cracked a vault under a dead lodge in Virginia, with a cloned contact lens Celia should never have had, and the lights came up on rows of tapes and freezers, and hard drives humming like a choir phases painted across the walls. Induction, substitution, convergence. And I watched Richard's knuckles go white as he whispered, "That's not my daughter." And I told him she is yours because you choose her, not because someone drew a box around her DNA. Then gunfire raked the pines, a diversion, and by the time we fought our way out, the real move was already underway back at the estate. I'll tell you straight. Rebecca walked in, elegant and unarmed, while a good man bled on the floor, and Evelyn froze and said, "Mommy." And for a heartbeat, the world split between love and conditioning. Then Richard shouldered in with a gun he didn't want to use, and Celia behind him clutching a canister like a heart. And I hit Rebecca hard enough to put her down because control can wear a beautiful dress, and it's still control. And when she woke downstairs, cuffed to steel, she smiled with a split lip and said, "You're too late." There are others. The others had names in the files, and none on paper, but one line never got fully blacked out. Holly Strong, EIT7, Echo Integration Test. The runaway that wasn't allowed to run, and I found her behind a quiet door in Richmond, after I spoke a passphrase that felt like opening a grave. The silence begins, where memory ends, and she let us in. Small apartment. No internet journals written by hand. Eyes that watched my hands before they watched my face. And she said, "If Rebecca's back, the fail-safe failed. If the fail-safe failed, the ring is waking." Her steel case held an activation chip she never used, coordinates sketched in code, a red dot drifting west, and the camera caught another ghost, Liam the strategist. They used to call Node L, walking through an airport. Like every step had been measured twice, and all the lines landed in the desert outside Phoenix, a decommissioned furnace where kids were tested to see who would snap and who would adapt, and in the hangar someone had chalked a circle for 7 and left a tablet like an altar playing Rebecca's face integration at sunset. Unless what? Unless we brought the variable back into the ring. So we went underground instead. Ladders and concrete and air that smelled like oil and old fear. And Liam stepped out of the red light calm and cold. And then said he'd cut the grid because he remembered his real name. His mother's song, you could feel the code loosen when he said it. We reached the core when the doors sighed and the alarms didn't scream. Only hummed a white room, a glass wall. Evelyn in the chair with wires along her spine. Rebecca in clinical white Sierra beside her, like a statue with breath. I told her to step back, and she told me to respect evolution. Richard said. She lied to everyone, and she said that's what visionaries do. Then, Sierra moved, and she hit like a metronome, all timing, no rage, and I changed the rhythm. Ugly and efficient. Aria slid to the console, because she remembered this machine from the worst nights of her childhood. Richard made a shield out of a metal tray, because fathers improvise when they have to. I took a shot that will call me when it rains, and still found the angle to break Sierra's stance. Aria found the override. Rebecca didn't move and pulled it. Sparks snapped. Evelyn gasped like she'd been underwater, and Sierra froze because her control was a wire, not a will. We didn't kill the system. We erased it long enough to run purge sequence hissing through the tunnels as we climbed. Liam met us bleeding but steady. The desert took the smoke and kept it, and we drove until the glow behind us looked small enough to forget, even though we knew we wouldn't. A month later, we were in Northern California. Not a mansion, just a house with windows that drink the sun, and a porch where a kid can draw. And Evelyn drew circles that meant safety instead of control. Birds with ridiculous eyelashes, stick figures holding hands, a star in the middle. She called peace, and Richard burned pancakes, because learning to stay is messy, and Celia handed files to people who move justice. Like tides, slow and relentless, and Sheriff Lell brought pie and said nothing, which is sometimes the bravest choice. Do I think it's over? No. I think we burned a root, and the tree still remembers growing. I think Rebecca is alive and cuffed and still rehearsing speeches about necessary cruelty. I think some of the ring is out there building quiet lives with new names and old scars. I think Holly mailed me a photo from a pier with the word free on the back, because some goodbyes are better as air than doors. And I think Evelyn sleeps with a stuffed bear under her chin and asks fewer questions at midnight, because she knows the answer I'll give won't be control. It'll be truth. I'm here. I'm not moving. You're not going anywhere without me. People see the fights and think that's the story, the kick, the elbow, the gun. I refuse to fire, but that's just smoke. The story is the staying, the boring, holy work of showing up after the sirens, sitting on the floor next to a child, while she draws a world that isn't trying to program her. telling a man with more money than vocabulary that control is just fear, wearing a better coat, and trust is harder, but worth it. And yeah, I still carry the Tuesday. When a white van took my sister, I still train because grief needs an outlet that isn't just tears. I still answer the burner when it buzzes at 3 a.m. But I don't run from the porch anymore. I set 2 mugs on the railing and watch the yard with a calm that took years to earn. So tell me what you think, and be honest. Is control ever protection? Or is it just a pretty cage? If a system promises safety but steals choice, is that mercy or manipulation? If you were me on that lawn, would you have run or stayed? Drop your city. Your take the moment you saw someone judged by their zip code or their skin or their paycheck and realize the story had another page like the video. If this hit you, subscribe. If you believe guardianship sounds like presents, not bars, and share your own story, because the loudest thing we can do some days is choose to stay.